Welcome to today's Talent Forward conversation, the fifth in our 2021 event series, where we're bringing the most pressing workforce recovery discussions into your homes and offices. This conversation tees up our final Talent Forward event for the year that will take place on October 26th from 2 to 4:30 p.m. Eastern. I sure hope you'll join us for what promises to be a dynamic set of conversations with C-suite executives, policymakers, nonprofit and philanthropic leaders around the most timely topics. How companies are supporting their working parents in new ways, employers as the new educators, digital skills, the importance of data to making smart policy and consumer decisions about education and training, and so much more. So please hold that time and you'll see more from us soon. Now to our conversations this afternoon. The global economy is rapidly changing. Labor markets are increasingly dynamic, and skills obsolescence is an issue for almost every industry. Technology's role in these changes has been both welcomed with open arms and feared in many circles. Today's conversations will explore how technological advances and the growth of the gig economy can open countless doors to better education and employment opportunities. We're thrilled to partner today with our good friends at PBS who have been hard at work creating The Future of Work, a documentary series exploring the monumental changes in the workplace and long-term impact on workers, employers, educators, and communities. This three-part broadcast series premiered on September 1, and we're eager to spread the word and encourage everyone to tune in. Let's first hear from Lorenz Grant, writer, producer, and director of the third hour of the Future of Work programming.
Hello, and welcome to this exciting conversation with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation and the Talent Forward event series, highlighting the role technology will play in fostering good jobs for our future. I'm Lorenz Grant. I'm an Emmy and Peabody Award-winning filmmaker and the producer of Part 3 of the new PBS docuseries Future of Work, which will be featured during today's conversation. From new gig work platforms to surgical robots, this public media project explores the role of technology in our workplace from every angle. For some, remote work has soared, and in other areas, AI and avatars have helped the fashion industry in surprising ways. We're proud to help enrich today's public conversation and encourage you to watch the three-part documentary at pbs.org, as well as the digital series following Gen Z and millennial workers at PBS Voices on YouTube. On behalf of the GBH team and the PBS Future of Work initiative, I want to thank the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation for convening this esteemed panel of tech employers and experts. Please enjoy this short clip from the series following Juan, a former oil field worker, reskilling for a career in clean energy.
The American dream is very much at risk.
Americans can't work any harder.
It's not even the future, it's the now.
The oil field was booming. The biggest, baddest thing happening in Texas. During the time when I was working in the oil field, I moved to San Angelo and bought a house out there. And then just a year after we bought the house, I got laid off. And then for a while, I was lost. I was lost. And I just saw wind turbines. I was like, well, what about that thing?
The old deal was I went to school, those skills took me through a 30-year working life, and then I got to retire.
Remember to check your leg straps. Make sure your latches are good.
Well, the new deal is now there are no guarantees, there's no certainty.
This can be a very dangerous industry.
Who's going first?
So it's roughly a 300-foot climb.
If I do everything right, if I'm safe about everything, I'll have a job tomorrow.
The heart of this is the shift from I learn, I do, I retire, to I learn, I do, I learn, I do,
Everybody safe?
and I come back and learn a whole bunch, and then I keep doing. It's completely at odds with everything that we have told the American worker.
To our audience today and all of those out there participating, I hope you'll check out this fascinating deep dive into the changing workforce. We certainly have found it very interesting, and we're so lucky to be joined today by Martha Ross, Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institution, who participated in the film. Welcome, Martha. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So I was struck by the comment in the trailer that there are no guarantees and no certainty in the world of work. And it's unsettling for me. I suspect it's unsettling for most. And I think, that's how a lot of people feel about technology in the workplace, automation, artificial intelligence. How do you reconcile that fear with the opportunities that such advances can offer to industry and most importantly to workers? Thanks.
That's a big, important question. I'm going to divide my answer in two. The first part is that I think you can make a good case for optimism and opportunities, and you can also make a good case for pessimism. There's a lot of unknowns and different scenarios right now. The way firms are going to deploy technology depends on a lot of things. There's friction involved. What's the organizational culture? What are their existing business models and management practices? What are the economic incentives? And are there any policy guardrails? But we do know that technology is going to continue to affect the labor market. It's probably going to continue the pattern that we have seen, which is that it really, it enhances the productivity of some workers and helps them earn higher wages. Those are mostly workers with higher levels of education. We know it's going to play out in a pre-existing set of economic and social conditions. For all of our talk about a knowledge economy, the majority of our workforce has less than a college degree. So we need to think about realistically, we need to think about how we measure skills. The bachelor's degree shouldn't be the only measure. We have a lot of low-wage workers, and wage growth has been minimal for the non-college educated part of the workforce. And most recently, we've seen the professional class weather this COVID recession and upheaval much better than many other occupations. So it's really highlighted the difference that the different opportunities and challenges that different occupations have. And we're also having a long overdue reckoning about racial disparities in this country on income, on wealth, on health, on all kinds of things. So I think of technology as interrelated with a lot of other factors that shape the labor market. And, the promise is that it enhances and increases productivity. And, there are cases that's documented. It has done that. But, there are these other questions about, is automation going to displace some workers? And how can we design it so that workers and technology can be complementary? Mm-hmm. So employers make decisions about how they introduce and use technology, along with their choices about how to structure their jobs, what wages they pay. Do they develop internal career ladders? Who do they partner with for, recruiting and hiring people? And government has choices too. We can assume that technology is going to displace some workers. what do we do then? We just saw with the pandemic that the existing technological organizational infrastructure of unemployment systems at the state level was wholly inadequate. What are we going to do about that? And there's also the question of who qualifies for unemployment insurance. This is a decades-old program, and the classifications of different workers and who qualifies for unemployment insurance no longer applies. So we need to, meaning the royal we, have a lot of decisions to make. And the royal we means workers, employers, government, the social sector. I mean, we have choices about how we organize work in society. And it's not going to be easy. There's a ton of competing interests and different ideas, but the economy exists to serve society. And we should think of it that way. So I just said a lot of maybe this, maybe that, and I had some opinions thrown in, but I'd like to state something else really clearly, which is that assuming that technology is going to have a central role in our economy and our society, we need to ensure that everyone has a baseline level of access to technology. Broadband, devices, software, user-friendly ways to learn the basics, and some version of a help desk. One thing the pandemic made really clear was how unequal access to technology is. And this kind of thing isn't going to immediately help a worker, but it is going to set us up better to be more prepared for lives as citizens, as family members, as workers, as students, as consumers.
Well, there's so much in the first part of your answer that I want to dig into about education, the role of government, what we value, we pay for in terms of federal government's investment in education. You said, we need to measure skills differently. I mean, right now it's a bachelor's degree or nothing, I guess, for the most part. But I don't know, we could have an hour long conversation about all that, which I wish we could. But I do think the last thing you said was a really great, and you may have answered really my question already, which is you have focused really keenly on, since the pandemic, on an equitable recovery. And so I guess the question about what role does technology play, you started to answer, which is, connectivity, all of those things. But what else would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Another piece is really boring. And it relates to the technological infrastructure of the government, of the US government, of state governments. I mean, states were strained so hard in meeting this, avalanche of interest in unemployment insurance, not of interest, of claims of need for unemployment insurance. You talk to some state officials and the code is written in decades old languages, and maybe one or two guys in the state know how to use it, actually how to amend it and change it. I mean, it is a bad situation. Yeah. So we need to look at our technological infrastructure, not with the eyes of the visionary. There's always room for visionaries, but we also need the role of the engineer who is looking for problems with how systems are structured and how to debug them and how to make them work better, both in terms of the infrastructure, the software, and all of that, but also in terms of ease of use. How easy or hard is it to navigate a state's website to file for unemployment insurance? I think sometimes it's really painful.
It is extraordinary to me, and I'm sure you're confounded by it. But we're about to talk to, the CEO of a drone company, and we're going to talk gig economy with executive from Lyft. We've figured out how to, hop in a stranger's vehicle and get where we need to go and do all of these things from our phone. Yet we can't create the technological infrastructure needed to ensure that people have access to unemployment insurance when they need it. I have to give a little plug to my colleagues at the Chamber Foundation who are working on the Jobs and Employment Data Exchange. I mean, they are digging into this and really and you said it's not incredibly sexy, but like it kind of is when you really dig into how important it is and what we can accomplish if we could actually bring the technology that we're talking about to government. It's crazy.
It is. And I think part of the solution is to think of it also as sort of like an organizational challenge. It's not that because the technology has to be used in the context of, the staffing patterns, the procurement rules, all of the things that influence how an organization uses technology. It may be that the job descriptions and the pay scales are all wrong. You need to sort of look at technology within the context of all of the other factors of how that organization operates.
Yeah. Well, let's shift a little bit. I know that you really specialize in looking at, into low wage workers, people who frankly have been most impacted by the pandemic. Can you talk a bit about how we connect those workers to job opportunities that are available as a result of technological advances?
Yeah, and to do that, I think we need to think broadly about technological advances, sort of like the same way I think we need to think broadly about what green jobs are. It is the wind turbines and the solar panels, but it's also like office jobs, like green energy companies need to have people who know how to use a whole bunch of different technologies, Excel spreadsheets and email, not only the fancy stuff. So part of the answer goes back to one of my earlier points that we need to do a much better job of ensuring basic tech literacy and access to everyone. And one of my colleagues, Mark Moreau, has done a lot of work on technology in the workplace. And, what is not at all sexy or high tech is also really important, like using Excel spreadsheets. And we need to make sure people have exposure to that kind of general purpose technology and have exposure to different kinds of jobs. Right now, it's very easy to, I'd say it's more common not to have an internship or some kind of work-based learning experience than it is. But being able to, in a low stakes situation, get acclimated to a professional workplace and that culture and learn some of the tools and start to build the networks is really important. So we need both like education and employers to try to build that bridge more closely between each other.
Yeah, and I guess something you said made me think, I guess you came back to this idea of sort of tech literacy and access being so critical. Whose job is this? I'm guessing, I'm gonna guess the answer is it's the collective, right? It's the job of all of us. It's the private sector, it's the public sector. But is this primarily a government solution to ensure access?
That's a good question. The trouble with the answer of the collective, as you know, is that no one owns it.
Right. Yep.
And it is a public good. So it does make sense for the government to lay out the goal and the imperative, but then it is everyone has a role in making it happen. And that's where, there's a lot of details and implementation to be worked out about how that happens.
Yeah.
It's probably some combination of the K through 12 system and, embedding tech access into all kinds of existing programs, adult literacy, job training, after school programs. You can just see sort of like trying to feed this into all of the streams that reach different groups of people.
Right. What about, let's turn quickly because we don't have a ton of time, but what industries would you say, do you have a thought on this, that we should pay close attention to in terms of making that jump from low wage to providing those upskilling opportunities? Who's most positioned, I guess, to either need to do that or is doing it well?
I would say we need to keep an eye on retail and hospitality for a couple reasons. They employ huge numbers of workers with less than a college degree and at relatively low wages. Although hospitality will always say, and they're correct, that it is possible to move up within. There are some internal career ladders where the bachelor's degree is not so important as a proxy. That being said, however, the labor structure of the workforce is there's a whole lot of lower wage people and a much smaller number of higher wage people who are in the management sphere. And so it is not possible for everyone who is in a low wage job to move up in that given industry. But that is fine. Like a lot of times people gain wages and skills by skipping industries. By switching industries. So that's good. But I think there is, especially with the pandemic, those industries are going through a lot of changes, and we need to keep an eye on them, both in terms of who they employ, how many are they employing, and how best can both the employers and government policy support those workers.
So quickly, as a wrap up, might be a good last question for you, Martha. So it's been 19 months since the start of the pandemic and still so much unknown. We were talking about it before we went live. What would you say the next year looks like from the perspective of technology's impact on our recovery?
I would say that the status quo bias is pretty strong. And so we're going to see more extrapolating out from the trends that we're seeing, which is that we're going to see a lot more, we're going to keep seeing, like e-commerce and delivery apps and technology grow. And along with discussions about, especially with these app-driven jobs, like where do they fit in our labor market? Decades ago, we developed this classification system, like a 1099 or independent contractor and a W-2 employee, and that's not a great fit for today. So we have to figure out how we handle that. I think those debates are going to keep going. I think it's really important to think about how, like, making sure that general social insurance programs like unemployment insurance apply to everyone, regardless of your employment status.
Well, that is a great way to transition, frankly, to our next speaker. But I first just want to say thank you, Martha. Thanks for setting the table for today's discussion. And we're so grateful for past relationships that the Chamber Foundation has enjoyed with Brookings, and hope that we can do more together in the future. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
And next, so looking forward to exploring the world of the gig economy with one of its leading employers. I'm so pleased to introduce Jeremy Bird, Deputy Policy Officer with the mobile app company Lyft. Thanks so much, Jeremy. Appreciate
Hi,
you being
Cheryl.
with me this
Thanks for
afternoon.
having me.
You bet. So, I mean, I think everybody would join me in saying if somebody would have told them 10 years ago that you would be like on your phone, arranging how you were going to hop in a stranger's personal vehicle to get from here to there, that we all would have said you're nuts. But we certainly all do it. And it's an extraordinary use of technology, a business model that's created tons of jobs here and around the world. So, I mean, just amazing. Talk to us a little bit about how Lyft leverages technology in ways that benefit both the customer as well as your drivers.
Yeah, again, thanks for having me. I'm excited about the conversation and following up on Martha's really interesting conversation from Brookings. Yeah, I mean, I think, you mentioned it, which is, years ago, you would have never thought that you'd be able to get on your phone and get wherever you want to go in any mode that you want to get there. We are very integrated in most cities with transit, bike, scooters, and rideshare. And so you can get on the Lyft app and, figure out wherever you want to go and what's the fastest, cheapest way to get there. And that has revolutionized people's lives. This idea that you can go into a city and not have to drive around looking for parking and overpay for parking and be able to, live the life that you want to live, that going to the airport on a really early morning flight at 4 a.m. no longer means you have to, stand out and, for 30 minutes and hope that you might get a cab. And so I think it has really revolutionized the way in which people get around. Yeah. And we've been able to leverage that technology to make it safer, more affordable, and easier access for the rider, as well as give the earnings opportunity that you talked about for drivers who can work in this sort of unique way where, unlike a traditional 9-to-5 job, you can work when you want, for as long as you want, for as many companies as you want. The idea that, you can't go into Starbucks as a barista and then decide you're just going to take off for the rest of the day because your kids have an early day at school, or decide you're going to take off for 2 hours to do something else and come back, or decide you're going to go work at Pete's next door. So it has really revolutionized the way in which people can earn both the rider in terms of where they're going and the driver in terms of their work.
I just personally want to say thank you because I sent my oldest off to college and he is a fervent user of the scooter on his campus, and I can see his bank account, and it's like, I'm like, how many scooters are you using a day? This is crazy.
Well, tell him thing.
Yeah. But I do think I love what you talked about in terms of, the flexibility that your employees or your drivers really enjoy. What do they value? I'm expecting, especially over the past 18 months, we all now value a level of flexibility that we've never had in our lives before. But that is a key piece to the gig economy, right? A key piece of what you offer to folks that you employ.
Yeah, I've been here for a couple of years and looked at a lot of different surveys of drivers nationally in different states, and I think it's pretty clear, overwhelmingly, it's the flexibility that drivers really prefer in the app-based economy. And it's not just flexibility in the sense that, traditional flexibility that, I know a lot of unions when I was in the labor movement fight for, which is, this idea that right now you can have flexibility, meaning you have a couple of weeks out and you can change your shifts around. No, this is like complete independence, the ability to turn on and off the app when you want, the ability for an entrepreneur to work in between trying to get their business running, or the caregiver. About 57% of the drivers on the Lyft app are caregivers of some kind, and the ability to be able to fit your work around your life and not the other way around is the thing that the drivers tell us over and over again they value more than anything.
That's such a great way that you put it. It's not flexibility so much as it's independence. That's really key. Tell us a little bit about programs like Grocery Access, Jobs Access. What role is technology playing in maximizing the positive impact those programs can have?
Yeah, we really, when we think about kind of traditional corporate social responsibility, or what we call social impact, it's really not so much about donating to a cause as much as it is using what we think is our superpower to hopefully make the world a better place. And so in that case, it's transportation. And we've invested for years in, you mentioned a couple of them, grocery access. There's so many parts of this country where getting access to good quality, healthy food is not something that people enjoy. How can we provide access for people to be able to get rides to and from grocery stores? How can we provide jobs access? This is a jobs access program we have. One of the biggest barriers to getting a new job is to be able to get there for the interview, and then to be able to get there till you get your first paycheck. And so the jobs access program is really a way in which we partner with local groups to provide folks with that transportation access until they get their first paycheck. We did that with vaccine access, which is one big barrier in the vaccine, was to be able to get there. So we partnered with the White House and others on free rides for folks to be able to get access to and from their vaccines. Voting access is another program. Basically looking at all the barriers that exist and trying to use that transportation superpower we have to more access and create a better country.
That is fantastic. Who are some of the organizations that you work with to sort of lift up communities through all of these programs that you just listed?
Yeah, it's a great question, because it's really about the local partners that are on the ground doing this work, who have access to the communities that have been working for a long time. So, we partner with United Way on a lot of these programs, or Goodwill, or, in some cities we'll partner with, some of the very, very local folks. I know we did a program in Boston with some women's shelters to provide access for women in need. And so that's really what we look at. We have a community engagement team on the ground, really in all major cities, and they're working closely with folks on the ground to figure out where can we provide the most transportation access, where there's the most need.
So you're obviously the epitome of a technology company. What do you all see issues with either skills or, finding employees within your enterprise to do to continue to advance, to continue to, sort of take the next step with your superpower in transportation?
Yeah, like I said, when you think about our driver base, it's very, and Martha touched on it at the end, it's pretty non-traditional in the sense that most folks who drive with Lyft have another W-2 job. And they are really using the platform to supplement the income that they're getting, either because their W-2 job is not enough, or they might be in between jobs, or again, they might be entrepreneurs, students, retired folks. And so, and in a lot of cases, Lyft is helping them pursue their other career aspirations. And we really hear stories about this. But also, there are some folks who are using the platform as their main source of income, or as their main, their main. And there are definitely programs that we're working with drivers, to make sure that there's both ways for them to earn more on the platform. And we have a lot of technology that I think has really changed the way that people work. One of the things, you can get paid instantly on the Lyft platform. That's not, the case in traditional jobs. And so, again, I mentioned the flexibility to be able to work with in however long you want, for as many companies as you want. And that's a big thing for folks on the platform, is they might be driving on the Lyft platform, but during the pandemic, when there's fewer rideshare rides, they might be doing delivery, which allows them to sort of meet their needs financially.
I was just going to say, did you see a sort of uptick in terms of people coming onto the Lyft platform to drive during the pandemic? Although then obviously there was probably a lot fewer people going places, but there were other opportunities, as you said, delivery and things like what has the sort of what has the pandemic done to Lyft in terms of drivers and work?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there was when the pandemic hit, there were a lot fewer people moving around, right? And you had, companies canceling their typical conferences. You had events not happening, the commute not happening. So, we saw a big dip in ridership, and therefore a dip for earning opportunities for drivers. And exactly, I think if it were a traditional arrangement, folks would have been in a lot of different situations. But having already had the opportunity to easily work on the delivery side with the different app companies, you saw a lot of drivers go and do that and then come back as rideshare started to pick back up again. And we're starting to see more and more demand for rides now in basically every city in the country.
That's great. So I'd love to circle back to that last sort of piece that Martha talked about, this idea that we're sort of structured in this way, and you referenced as well, 1099s versus independent contractors. And there's obviously lots of attention being paid to this idea of how to treat independent contractors and what does that mean? What's your view there?
I think Martha hit on it exactly right, which is we created laws in the 1930s, of which we have two classification of workers in this country, either 1099 independent contractors or employees. Those laws were written, decades ago. The reality for our drivers is the answer is to be able to have the independence and flexibility that the independent contractor relationship provides, but couple that with unique and different benefits that make sense for the work. One of the questions that, Martha talked a lot about unemployment insurance. Unemployment insurance traditionally doesn't actually make sense for an app-based driver who doesn't really experience unemployment, but might experience underemployment. So how do you create a system that's just not based on the way it's always been done to create something that actually is a win-win for drivers? And so we've pushed at the federal level and the state level this concept of independence plus benefits, which is don't take away the things that drivers tell you overwhelmingly they support, no matter what state, what survey we give, doesn't matter the demographics, doesn't matter full-time, part-time, spare time. Drivers say overwhelmingly they do not want to be employees. They want to be independent contractors. So how do you couple that, giving drivers what they want and need to fit into their lives, with this concept of being able to provide benefits that make sense? And we believe that there's a real innovative policy solution that would allow us to sort of innovate the policy in the way that we've innovated the work and the technology.
Have you enjoyed a positive response from policymakers to this idea of independence plus? Like, are there people at the federal level willing to innovate around the policy? I mean, I think about this, we touched on it with Martha, but the idea of how we support training and education in this country. I mean, I just have found very little interest in really digging in and trying to figure out what does that system look like for where we are today. So I'm just curious, what kind of response do you get?
We have, I think that there is there's a couple of things going on where it's different and innovative, and that therefore scary to folks. It's new, and there is a cynicism about corporations in general. There's a cynicism about the app-based space that there must be some rationale that isn't just about sort of what actually would be best for drivers and what we think for the future of work. That does exist, and some of it is I think fear, and some of it's legitimate. But I find a lot of folks that are open, and when you really talk through the details, and when folks are willing to understand exactly how it actually works, and they really dig into the way in which folks are using the app, and you really dig into the policy solutions, you do find a receptive audience. But it's it is going up against decades of the way it's been done, and it's change, and so it's not always easy. But we're confident that if we go into those conversations open, and we go into those conversations with real solutions. Like, we don't think the status quo works either. We want to protect the independence that drivers want and need. We want to protect the way in which the model works. We think it's provided such good benefit to the consumer. At the same time, we think that you ought to be able to provide benefits, and that folks who are really relying on it as their primary source of income should have a different set of benefits than folks who might be getting on, 4 or 5 hours, a month or a week.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, which I feel like we could really we could dig in so much more, and I would love to. I guess I'll end with just a question for you. What does the future look like for Lyft and for Lyft's technology strategies?
I mentioned it a little bit at the beginning, but we really are looking at just how people want to get around, and it's not just in rideshare. The first about the future is 100% electric vehicles by 2030. We're completely committed to that. We're doing everything we can at the state and federal level to get there, and that's going to require societal change as well, because we need to make electric vehicles affordable, and we need to figure out a way in which we can get there. But so rideshare becoming electrified is important. Making sure people understand that when you get on the app, you can get anywhere in any different mode, whether that's a bike or a scooter or an electric vehicle, an electric bike that's being charged at the station. And just for us, it's being able to do that in a safe, reliable, and affordable way. And I think we've got a lot of work to do to continue to iterate on the technology to make that a reality for every single American.
Well, it has been such a pleasure, Jeremy. I can't thank you enough. This has been a great conversation, and I know that the Chamber appreciates, the relationship that we have with y'all, and certainly appreciate you being here this afternoon and sharing all your insights. Thanks so much.
Thanks again for having me.
You bet. And last, but certainly not least, we're joined by Skydio CEO Adam Bree. Adam, thank you so much for being a part of today's discussion. I'm really excited to talk with you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Cheryl. I'm excited to be here.
So let's just jump right in, and let's just talk about the drone industry. How did you get started in it, and what brought you to the creation of Skydia?
I grew up flying radio-controlled airplanes, which were kind of the predecessors to drones. So I took this way too seriously as a kid, and I actually traveled all over the country flying in aerobatic competitions, which was kind of a niche hobby within a niche, but it was super fun, and I learned a lot about flight and aerodynamics, and that's what got me interested in engineering. And then I was fortunate to be starting grad school at MIT around the time when you could first take radio-controlled airplanes and put computers and sensors on them, and get them to do smart stuff. And that was just completely addicting to me. The idea that you could write software to start to replicate some of the things that expert human pilots would do was just really exciting. And I was fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. So that's where I met my co-founders. And this was kind of mid-2000s time frame. So it was before drones were really seen as an emerging technology category. But we did a lot of exciting research there. The output of my master's project was an airplane that could fly itself around in a parking garage using only onboard sensors. And the motivation for starting Skydio was basically looking out and seeing all the amazing things that people wanted to do with drones in the consumer world, capturing amazing video, in the public safety world, using drones to get useful information to keep everybody safer. And then I think most excitingly in the sort of infrastructure industrial world, using drones to document what's happening, track changes. So the concepts with drones were always amazing, but it seemed like none of this stuff was really going to work the way that you want it to, unless you could trust the drone to fly itself, unless it could perform useful tasks on its own. And this is stuff that we knew a lot about from our research. We loved working on, and it just seemed like it was a key missing ingredient for the industry. And so at the most basic level, that's what motivated us to start the company in 2014. And you never predict exactly how things are going to go, but that's basically what we've been working on ever since. And I think we're at an incredibly exciting point now, not just as a company, but as an industry where we're starting to see the promise that drones had many years ago really be fulfilled and come to life with customers.
Well, you mentioned that sort of promise, and I think I read somewhere that you said you thought there was a more meaningful purpose for drones and their potential than delivering sushi, I think was the although I know at the time I thought that was very cool. I love the idea of some Amazon package getting delivered to my doorstep. But tell us about your customers and the industries that are best sort of suited for drones and sort of that vision for something other than delivering food?
Well, look, I think food delivery is fun. I just think it gets a disproportionate amount of attention relative to the actual value that's there, and certainly relative to the stage of deployment. So, I kind of jokingly say that, you might save somebody a few dollars by delivering them a burrito, but you can literally save somebody's life in a lot of these industrial applications. So, there's a really wide range of exciting things happening with our customers today. But I think some of the most interesting ones are these inspection applications. So for construction companies, for telecommunications companies, for energy utilities, what we find, and this is a very common pattern across all these different customer bases, is that they're really incredibly dangerous tasks out there that people are doing manually, where, in order to inspect part of a power plant, they might be building scaffolding, people might be rappelling from a great height down to sort of see what's going on. There's these things called bucket trucks that people use to inspect bridges that drives along the top of the bridge and hangs a person underneath. And sometimes these things tip over, they block traffic. And I think drones are really one of these really, I hate to use the word, but disruptive technologies where you can do things 10x safer, better, cheaper, but also get 10x better result because you're getting a full digital record of whatever you're inspecting. So I think it's still early in the evolution of these things being deployed, but it's no longer just slideware. We have like North Carolina Department of Transportation using our drones to inspect all the bridges in their state. We have company Accurate Drone Solutions on the other end of the spectrum, which is a drone service provider that's using our drones in a lot of construction sites, and they're seeing really incredible benefits from the autonomy capabilities that we have.
I can imagine you all are poised with this, conversation here in Washington. I think we're on the, just on the edge of passing major infrastructure legislation and $1 trillion investments for lots of new projects that will probably benefit from the use of your technology. So that's fantastic. So, we sort of talked about at the front end of this program, that there's a fear out there with automation and AI, and that will lead to the loss of jobs and the elimination of jobs. And you mentioned there's some things that you can do with drones that are much safer than what we're asking people to do. But how do you feel about that? And what do you say in response? And can the use of drones lead to more and higher quality jobs as opposed to just, sort of focusing on the elimination of some?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think that anybody who's being honest about these topics has to acknowledge that new technologies being deployed and AI and automation are going to change the landscape of work. It's not the case that things are just going to stay exactly as they have been. But I think we've seen this kind of in the long view of the evolution of technology, and I think it's going to be just as true for AI and autonomous systems, that the new technologies, if deployed thoughtfully, open up incredible new opportunities. So, it's the way that companies think about inspecting their infrastructure will change over time, but that doesn't mean that there's fewer jobs involved. It typically means that, I think will mean that there's different jobs, and the people who are performing them can be more effective, they can be safer, and ultimately make more money. And we actually see this, and I mentioned this company, Accurate Drone Solutions, who's a drone service provider. Like they're a company that makes money by going out and flying drones to perform inspection and mapping tasks. And they've actually, since they switched to using Skydio from autonomous drones, they've become more profitable as a business because they can perform more jobs faster, they can get to more job sites, they get better data. They're seeing something like a 10x ROI improvement versus the sort of conventional manual drone technology that they've been using. And then the other big theme that we see is a lot of big infrastructure companies with autonomous drones can insource the programs rather than outsourcing and bringing in somebody else to fly the drone. It becomes possible for them to train their workers, oftentimes union workers who are out there performing inspections and maintenance, to be drone operators themselves. And these are people who, they're not going to be full-time drone pilots, but if the drone is smart enough and easy enough to use, it's another tool that they can have in their tool belt when they go out to deal with a distribution line that might be down, or a pole that tipped over. And so, the high level thing that we think about is that the product and the technology should adapt itself to the user rather than the other way around. And the more of that you do, I think the more that you'll see these things deeply integrated in the way that companies do business.
Can we talk a little bit about the sort of career trajectory of somebody who wants to be in your field? What are the jobs? I mean, I think initially my immediate thought is a drone operator, a drone pilot, but I'm sure there are, any number of jobs in the field, new jobs that we hadn't thought about. What does that look like?
Yeah, so I'll start with kind of a different tack on that question. So as a company, our core technology is mainly in the software, and we've invested a huge amount in the AI and autonomy capabilities of our drone. But there's no way that we could deliver the products that we do without designing and manufacturing the hardware ourselves. And I think this is a really important theme. As a country, we have lost a lot of manufacturing jobs, and I think we've lost a lot of that competency. But if you think about the next generation of autonomous systems, I very much believe that hardware-software integration is going to be key to making those products. And along with hardware-software integration comes manufacturing. So we're manufacturing all of our products today in the United States. We're growing aggressively there. And for the drone industry, and I think for the sort of coming robotics industries in general, there's a huge opportunity for the U.S. to get back into the manufacturing game. And I think that's going to be really important for us as a country. It's something that as a company we're leaning into, but there's a lot of opportunity for job creation there, and a whole range of different disciplines, from technicians assembling drones to like all the different manufacturing competencies that it takes to bring electronics and mechanical systems together. So that's kind of one angle of it. Another angle, and I'm starting with kind of the internal view, but I think that training in math and science and software is super important. And in a lot of ways, the game that we're playing is a talent game to just get the most talented people around the country and around the world to come and work at Skydio and companies like Skydio to develop these products and technology. So that's kind of the internal view, and I think there's huge opportunities there. The external view is also, I think, pretty exciting. And the basic capability that drones offer is the possibility of putting a sensor where you need it, when you need it, without needing to have a person physically on site. But that doesn't mean that you don't need a person who's thinking about that thing and looking at the data that's coming from it. And I think what we're going to see more and more of is these really high leverage positions where people are consuming that data, making decisions based on it, making business dispatch type operations of like, yes, we need to fix this. No, we don't need to fix this. We should be keeping track of that in a very high leverage remote capacity. And you mentioned the infrastructure legislation that's going through. One of the things that we're excited to see is a program we call DIG, Drone Infrastructure Inspection Grant Program, which sets aside some money for infrastructure companies to stand up drone programs, but it also sets aside money for upskilling and training for people to use drones and figure out how to adapt their skill sets for kind of the coming paradigm.
Do you know, and it's okay if you don't, who does that well? Who do you go to recruit smart, trained people?
That's a great question. I mean, there's a wide range of disciplines out there. Yeah. I would say what we see the most of, what we're most excited about, is organizations training their existing workforce to do some of this stuff. So, for example, with departments of transportation, a very common theme that we see is that there's either technicians or bridge engineers who are used to performing traditional bridge inspections, who aren't expert drone pilots, but can become proficient with Skydio products and technology to incorporate it into what they're doing. And that's true in every category, like energy utilities, a similar story where there's a lot of frontline operators who are going out to do inspection and maintenance. And I think there's a huge opportunity for them to get trained up enough to be proficient with these products, to just have it be another useful tool for them to deploy. So I would say there's no right or wrong answer here, but I think there's, in a lot of cases, a really amazing opportunity to help people who are in these sort of functions now just get a new skill and thus get a new tool to help them do their jobs better.
Well, I think that's a good, that sort of segue into this question of kind of principles that result from a successful workforce development program for emerging technology fields such as yours. What are those principles, and how does your organization, how does Skydio sort of support those principles?
So this is another really important area, and you mentioned this to begin with. Drones and AI and autonomy are at the center of, some people get very excited about these things, but I think they also make people nervous and apprehensive about like what kind of future are we headed towards. And this is an area that we think a lot about as a company. There's some technology companies sort of take the view of, we're going to build our product, we'll throw it over the wall, whatever people do with it. It's not really our responsibility. In this space, I don't think that's really a tenable approach, because the potential positive impact is enormous, but there's also pretty clear possibilities for abuse and misuse. And, just to be very blunt, like none of us want to live in a world where drones are used for kind of mass surveillance and invading people's civil liberties and invading people's privacy. So this is an area where we're taking a pretty active position as a company. We've released a set of principles we call the Skydio engagement and responsible use principles, which lay out some high level ideas for both the good that we think drones can do, but also some of the risk areas, and how we can mitigate those from a product perspective, from a regulatory perspective, and also from a customer engagement perspective. And we're most advanced on this within the public safety realm, where there's really enormous benefit that drones can provide. There's a lot of life-saving examples in search and rescue missions, but also in kind of tactical situational awareness, where officers have been able to use drones to de-escalate situations and keep the officer safer, keep the suspect safer, keep the community safer. So the data is there to prove that these things can make a positive difference, but there's also misuse and abuse vectors there. And I think that the more awareness we can cultivate around this in the public sphere, and have the people who are setting policy kind of be aware of the positives and the potential risks, the better we can be. And as a company, the thing that we most directly control is our product. So we're also forward leaning on this from a product perspective and trying to design the product in a way that encourages responsible use, and also build in some features and functionality that provide safeguards.
I'm so glad we have leaders like you that are thinking about this and sort of forward leaning on that issue. We don't have a ton of time, but I want to ask one sort of final question about women and women representation in the industry. I think it's small, as it is in a lot of fields. Do you have any thoughts on that, or is there anything you all are doing to try to sort of increase the representation or gender diversity in the field?
Yeah, it's another really important topic, and you're right that the numbers are very skewed. I mean, if you look at the number of registered Part 107 pilots, which is sort of the FAA designation for people who have passed basic certification in drone flying, I think it's something like 93% men, 7% women. So it's it's very skewed number. So I think there's no single magic answer here. One of the things that I think about that I think is really important is creating, celebrating and creating visibility around the women that are having a lot of impact in the industry. And there are a ton of examples of this, and we're fortunate to have a lot of amazing women at Skydio who are playing key roles for the company across everything from product and engineering to sales and customer support. We're trying to invest internally to help them develop and help them get visibility across the industry. So, we've had events around this. We have women that are serving in key leadership positions and external panels, like FAA rulemaking committees and things like this. And then we're also doing quite a bit of work to engage at kind of the educational level, to create awareness around the products and technology, and also try to build the talent funnel and the talent pipeline so that we can attract people from more diverse backgrounds into the company. And I think for us as a company, and I believe also for the industry, that the trend lines are positive, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Well, there's certainly more, certainly more that organizations like ours can do to sort of lift up, elevate those women in Skydio and other leaders in the industry. And so I think that's something we ought to look into doing as well in our platform. So I can't thank you enough, Adam, for being with us today, for sharing a little bit more, giving us a little bit more insight into an industry that I think a lot of folks are new to, but certainly will know more about in the future, and really appreciate your leadership and Skydio's leadership in breaking new ground. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Cheryl. This is great.
Fantastic. We hope that I also just wanted to say that we're very grateful for the other speakers here today, to Martha, to Jeremy for joining us on this final monthly virtual series of Talent Forward. We will have our capstone larger summit next month on October 26th, and we hope that you all will join us then. I also want to acknowledge and say that we're very grateful to PBS for their involvement in today's event, and look forward to watching more of their Future of Work series. Thank you all so much for being here with us this afternoon, and we'll see you next month, October 26th. Thanks.